show. I'd like to call this special open council meeting for October 22nd, 2015.
No question.
Introduction of late items. And I see one introduction of late items, I think it'll be number 4 on my thing anyway, or number 3. Bylaws with no accompanying report. And B, remove item 7, procedural motion. However, we're going to reinstitute item 7, procedural motion. So, motion for adoption of the agenda as amended.
So
Other copies of the agenda?
Need a second.
Can I have a second just for that motion?
I'd just like to see this. I can see the agenda.
Nothing's pending.
Do we have some agendas kicking around?
Yes, we're going to hand it out. So the addendum is on the front page in green, and then the other agenda is
You, Mr. Jackson? Thank you, dude.
Once we're through.
Thank you.
so the white page in the back. That's
Oh.
the-
Then I had asked McIver and Dana Merritt, and I was asking if I could do this.
thank you.
So we have a motion made, we need a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Bestwick. All those in favor? Opposed? Seeing none. We will move on to item number 3, I guess, on the agenda, or whatever it is. And that is the motion that property tax exemption bylaw 2015, number 7215, to exempt certain lands and buildings from taxation be adopted. I will be stepping out as I did the other evening because of a perceived conflict.
I'm moving more.
I think Wendy has to be.
Pardon me. Okay, so the motion is that the recommendation is that property tax exemption bylaw number 215-7215 to exempt certain lands and buildings from taxation be adopted. So moved.
Second.
Question? Discussion? Seeing none, call question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Let's go get the...
Are we in conversation on this? Do we have time? No.
We just voted for it.
Wasn't going to change my vote, but I have some questions.
After the vote?
Whatever, but I won't ask questions. We're going 100 miles per hour, so I thought this guy was chairing. No, you're chairing. But never mind. How dare ask questions? City animal.
Well, there's a process, Councillor.
You ready for my lecture? What is it?
Pardon?
You heard me.
We're going to wait for the acting chair to come back
Why is he chairing if you're here?
because I'll be leaving.
I'll get a lecture you now, lawyer on me.
So,
Make it easy.
so we will move into corporate services. A draft 2016 to 2020 financial plan. Purpose to provide council with the draft 2016 to 2020 financial plan for reference during deliberations leading to adoption of the 2016-2020 financial plan. And we have a presentation from Mr. Victor Mima, Director of Finance.
Mr. Chair, just before Victor starts, I just want to do a couple introductory comments, and I just want to actually thank IT staff. I didn't realize we'd have the camera set up so well, so I really appreciate them getting what you want done so quickly. And
Agreed.
We'll see how it looks, and if you're not happy with the quality or whatever, that's something we can revisit and have a look at.
Sounds good.
So, Mayor, Acting Mr. Chair and Council, Victor's going to present a budget. This is the start of the formal process of the budget. And of course, staff have been working on this since the last budget was adopted by Council. It's had a tremendous amount of work done to it. I think you're going to be very happy with what we present. I think the tax rate is, the job staff has done is phenomenal to work on ensuring that the tax rate is something that I believe is supportable. I realize that you're going to review this and decide for yourself. Revenues are up, so we had the benefit of revenues being higher than anticipated. And I think that you're going to find that we've presented something that you can work with. What is going to be a good discussion for council is what's the public process that you want following receiving this tonight, and how do you want to engage the public? And just my hope, my really strong hope, given that we're doing a core review, is that we can get through this budget faster than we have before, put it to bed, and then focus on the core review, because it's going to drain financial staff's time. And the staff that are here is only the tip of the iceberg of the staff that's required to make this happen and to make the core review happen. So having said that, I'll turn it over to Victor and let's run through it.
Thank you, Chair. I have a presentation. I just need to check if everyone can hear me in the room. Okay, thank you. We have a very brief presentation to make, hoping it will last between 30 and 45 minutes. Feel free to interrupt me if there are any questions as we go through the process. This is version 1, and as Ted said, this begins the process of reviewing this, and we may end up with 2 or 3 other versions as we progress and engage with yourselves and the public. Just to keep ourselves straight as to what we want to cover in the presentation, just a couple of things, where we are in the process, the context that's informing the numbers that you see now, some decisions that are pending that will probably impact what we are dealing with, and then we will just go through the operating budget and plan as well as the capital budget and plan at a high level, at least for this process. And as you will see at the end, we propose a process that will also involve a workshop with council at some point in November, where we can get into details if need be. So, staff have been making presentations to council since the last budget and more after July. And you have had a number of presentations, and I've just tried to group them around. We had some business cases on IT, on RCMP support, solid waste or garbage automation pickup automation, RCMP staffing, fire services, and I missed the parking services model. And you also had some updates on transportation plan, land acquisition, reserve policy. You will have an update on revenue policy coming up next Monday. We have postponed bringing forward items 2E and F, which is asset management and water services. Asset management we will bring back with an update in 2016, so it would make sense to bring that up then.
Question? Chair? Chair? Question?
Oh, Councillor Hahn.
Thanks. You mentioned DCCs in your last presentation to council. Where does that fall in DCC?
The process is ongoing at a staff level as a review, and once that is ready, it will come back to council.
So, but it's not ERF, right?
No, I didn't reference it here.
Oh, okay, but we're going to have a discussion.
Yes, we will.
Okay, thank you.
So now we're ready with some numbers for you to look at least at the first draft level. Briefly, as we went through the process over the months and more recently in the last week, we were also mindful of the economics around us and also the federal elections, the outcome now we know. Obviously, there is some promises that were made in terms of infrastructure funding. Hopefully that comes to place in good time. There has been some revision really of the national as well as the provincial budget performance and growth in 2016. The two projections, really they just reduced it by 0.3%, but they still project that the economy is going to grow at least by 2%. We obviously have item number 4 hanging over us, and so we're pretty mindful about the core service review process as it informs what we're doing now.
Councillor Kip?
Yeah, the core service review, we hear a lot of concern about it with staff time and that. How much time through staff, how much time is staff done preparing now for core review items? Because we've talked about a lot. I mean, I know years ago put forward the 6-item core review, financial documentation, other reviews of other community staff reviews. How much has been done to date on the current core review preparatory?
Ian, are you here again?
Yep. Through the chair, I think to date we've just put together the collection of information on the website, so all the relevant materials that a proponent might want to review before bidding on the project, and then of course just the work with Dr. Dinesh.
Thank you.
Thank you. So some highlights to take away. It's a status quo budget. What that means is you are basically seeing a reflection of what is in the current financial plan, the 2015-2019 financial plan. We are estimating an operating budget of $135 million. This requires a property tax increase of 1.7%, and within that 1.7%, 1% is a contribution towards management, which effectively means a 0.7 increase in our costs. We are also estimating $1.2 million in new property tax revenue from assessment growth. Relative to user fees, these are fees that council has set before, 7.5% for water, 5% for sewer, and we are estimating 1% for garbage. In respect of the pending core service review, we are not proposing any new services or programs in 2016. In terms of capital, we are looking at a total investment for the 5 years of about $180 million, $37 million in 2016, and $143 million for the other 4 years, 2017 to 2020. There is about 3 decisions that or business cases we've brought to council that council is still considering. Garbage pickup, parking service, as well as fire services. So what you are seeing in the numbers as we speak does not reflect changes coming out of the presentations that we have made to council. But if council decides otherwise, those changes will be incorporated at least at the next level or next version.
Councillor Kip?
Can I have an explanation on that? Were those built into a higher level of service, or just built into the budget, and will be removed if, say, we didn't go to automated? So they're built in as is that a higher level of service, or just a change in service?
They are not in the budget.
Right. But is it considered a higher level of service? Or
Enhanced.
just what?
Enhanced, that was
Enhanced. Okay.
Enhanced.
That's what I'm trying to figure out.
So we'll get into that explanation. There will be enhanced services, but at this point, what I wanted to be clear is that they are not included in the budget as yet. So just to give you a projection of our tax increases for the next 5 years, we're looking at an average of about 2.5% for the 5 years for each year. But 2016, 1.7, 2017, 4.1, coming down in 2018 to 3.2, and then tapering off in 2019 and 2020. And we will spend a little bit more time as to what makes up the 1.7% in 2016. So in order to help council, we've tried to frame up some decision points as we go through the process and try to organize ourselves so that it's easy for yourselves and us to go through the decisions that we need to make. So we have grouped our decision packages into 3 areas: new services or programs, enhanced services, and I think previously known as higher service levels, and then sustaining costs. What's important to note is within each of these 3, how much discretion that you have. Obviously, you have the right to make your decisions, but we would hope that we would keep to some level of discretion as I outlined here. So if it's a new service, which we don't have in 2016, council has total discretion whether to say forget it or add it, so it doesn't impact the budget at this point. But every new service or program will always be supported by a business case. When it comes to higher service levels or enhanced services, there is some limited discretion because you are looking at a service or program that's already in place and we are trying to make improvements to it. Regardless of the decision you make, the service may actually have to continue to be delivered in some fashion, depending on how you decide. And so at that point, you're looking at changes in delivery method or a response to growth or utilization of the service. They are also supported by a business case, and there's some limited discretion really as to because you already have these programs in place. The third one has very limited discretion. I call it limited because some of the increases are really driven by contracts, things that you already have decided before. A good example would be contracts, labor contracts. They are already in place. If it's a 1% increase, it's a 1% increase. It sustains the services that we have in place. So we group them separately so we don't spend too much time around what is already set or decided. So having said that, so the cost pressures for 2016 amount to about $3.6 million or 3.6% equivalent to our property tax. Just to get our heads around what 1% of property tax revenue is, it's estimated at about $985,000. So if we take the conversation I just had with you about grouping these along decision points, so there are no new services that we are proposing in 2016. We are proposing some enhanced services amounting to about $757,000, sustaining costs of about $2.8 million. And I'll take you through some detail in that regard. On enhanced services or high service levels, we already have decided on the first 2, which is the ITs and the RCMP support within the year. And those 2 amount to about 0.2% of our property tax increase equivalent. Then we have in the 2015 to 2019 financial plan, the first batch of an increase in our RCMP members, and the first 4 would come in 2016 at a cost of about $580,000 or 0.6% of our property tax equivalent.
Okay.
On those 2 that we've already agreed to, the last column says they're both the same percentage of the budget, but the fluctuation is, it's $30,000 different. What is 1% of our budget now?
$985,000. $985,000 was just previous.
Oh yeah, so that's what I'm saying. So 1% would be, or 1/10 would be $90,000, right? So I see. So just rounded them up and down.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Investment.
Thanks. The IT position or expenditure I understood was for security in our system, in our current system. That we did about 2.5 months ago or 2 months ago.
So the discussion was in camera, but it's open to budget that there's a 1 FTE increase.
So, and that's devoted or dedicated to the RCMP?
now.
Okay, so
So there's two. So the first one is the IT, the second one is RCMP support. So they're separate.
I was tying everything into the RCMP, but, sorry.
Thank you. So this amounts to $757,000 of enhanced services, amounting to about 0.8% of our product tax equivalent. On the sustaining costs, there is 1% for general asset management that was set up by council. We have other miscellaneous expenses of about $50,000 and those. But our labor contracts would require about $974,000 or about 1% of our property tax equivalent. And then we are also projecting an increase of our existing RCMP contract for about $300,000. And then the other big increase really relates to utilities of about $309,000. We're also increasing our equipment contribution to equipment reserve. Remember when I made my presentation, I spoke about that we are recalculating some of the rates, so we are able to recover enough for us to replace the assets when they becomes necessary to replace them. We also have a little bit of internal efficiency amounting to about $172,000. So on sustaining costs, we are looking for an additional of about $2.8 million or 2.8% of our property tax increase. So how do we propose we fund the 1.7%? So at the top, I have my total cost pressures of the $3.6 million. We are also going to receive about $525,000 of the new Fortis agreement. Our grants in lieu are coming up a little bit higher, which is an assessment of properties belonging to the high level of government. We are projecting a $32,000 increase in our building permits revenue, as well as within the Parks and Recs area. Then there is a little bit of reduction in some property rentals and other fees at the ICC of about $126,000. We are also projecting certain growth that will amount to revenue of about $1.2 million. That leaves us with a funding gap of $1.6 million, which is equivalent to the 1.7% that we are asking for as a property tax increase. What does that mean to a typical household in Nanaimo? Unfortunately, this looks a little bit small, so for some of you, you may not be able to read this. What it means really is we are looking at about $33 increase in terms of our property tax per household. And our typical household here by BC stats is about $331,000 in assessment. And then in terms of user rates, you're looking at about an increase of about $38 or 6%. And you take this all together, it's an increase of about $71 or 2.7% per typical household in 2016.
Mr. Chair.
Councillor Kip.
Can you go back one slide related to this? Okay, so we're banking Fortis agreement. How long is it extended out for the $525,000?
It's indefinite. As long as the agreement is in place.
That amount could fluctuate too, though. It could, there was with the pricing or. And secondly, the grants in lieu. I guess my concern with is looking at what we're calling enhanced services and new or sustained services, and banking it on grants and banking it on agreements that could fluctuate is a concern. So I just had to ask those questions. If it's, I mean, you're never guaranteed grants are coming. They're not always guaranteed. I think this government would be better than that shot. But I have a concern when some of these agreements in place and then Parks and Rec revenue going up. That seems like an increase, which concerns me too, because I'm finding it $5 for a swim at a pool is tough for some of our community to get into. It's a special event for a family to take 4 to the pool with their kids and family and the family rate. So our increasing in revenues in our social services area, that private place area, our parks and recreation is concerning to me. And I do like the fact that this property growth is up, and that means some stuff is moving in the community. It's not all stagnant, as I hear in the community all the time. Thank you.
It's good. My caution on is that property growth is a false economy.
Doesn't pay for
It's a
itself.
false economy.
Otherwise, we wouldn't need DCCs, user fees, and all that if taxes
Right.
paid for itself. It doesn't pay for schools and a whole bunch of stuff. So yes, I do, but that means people are coming here and things are moving as business.
That's what I was going to say, Councillor Kipp, is you're right in another way, though, that the property growth, when it actually helps, when it matches the enhancement of services that we propose, is really critical.
So that's where, if I can continue, when I hear enhanced, I've always used the terms mandatory, discretionary, and those we consider foundations. So eventually I'd like to see an all-source revenue chart that shows me what's coming from taxation, what's coming from user fees, what's coming from other governments, what's coming from the sale of assets or anything we do. I'd love to see that. And I'd love to see some of these things related to what we consider, I guess, in our core review. We'll say what's just mandatory, the government tells us to do ECDEV or OCP, and what is our foundation and what is discretion. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Just a few comments. I think
This is the first time I saw this document. I've been away on holiday and I'm loaded.
that's it.
Thank you.
So the Fortis agreement, we have an agreement signed, so it's not like the normal grants that we wait for government to give us. So we have a little bit of certainty with this one. The grants in lieu, this is assessment on federal buildings that we are in our jurisdiction.
But I will caution too, remember when BC Ferries or some of the places said, we don't agree with your assessment. And that has happened too. So those are all up for grabs. And when other governments are looking for money, giving it away is the hardest thing.
Sure. And on Parks and Recs, we are, that increase is not necessarily because of increased rate, it's really an increase in utilization. So I wanted to clarify that, please. So we've gone through this, $71 per year on average for a typical household in Nanaimo. So that concludes my presentation on the operating side. So I'm going to quickly go through the capital side. So the capital budget, as I mentioned before, we are looking at about $180 million for the 5 years, about $37 million in 2016. It ramps up a little bit between 2017 and 2018 and then tapers off for the last 2 years. And the funding for that, about 84% really comes from what I call cash, comes from reserves, as well as general and utility or user fee revenue. And then we get a little bit of grants, about 3%, and private contributions of about 5%, and then debt of about 8% for the 5 years. Looking at 2016, which is the $37 million, just wanted to show the split between the 3 categories. We have the strategic acquisitions of about 1.8 or $2 million. Then we have the new or upgrade assets of about $90 million. Then you have the renewal, which is your asset management piece, of about $17 million. How this is funded?
Councilor Bestwick.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt. If you just return to the previous slide. Oops. So where you broke down, there you go. Will we have, if it's not in this package, what the renewal items are and what the new upgrade items are?
Yes, you will have a full package for the budget workshop that gives you a detailed information to list out the individual projects that make up.
And that's forthcoming?
Yes, that is.
Thank you.
So where is the funding coming in 2016 for our capital? And was trying to show about 6 million is coming from asset management reserves, about another 6 million from DCCs. We're going to borrow about $2.4 billion. And then from revenue and user fees will be $7.2 million and about $2 million in private contributions and $2.3 million in grants. That's where the $7 million for 2016 is going to come from. So for the other 4 years, which is 2017 to 2020, just same split between the three major spending categories for capital. About $83 million for newer, which is asset management, and then $54 million for new assets or upgrading assets, and then $6.4 million for strategic acquisitions of assets. For next steps, what you can expect, we are targeting that we will have you consider for 3 readings the 2016 to 2020 financial plan bylaw at the December 14 meeting. And leading to that, we are going to undertake some public engagement. We will go through the normal e-town hall. You may be familiar with that process. We will have that scheduled for the November 23rd meeting. And then we are also going to try out a new online engagement or interactive tool, and we're going to try and demo that in a few minutes for you. But I wanted to just outline the timelines. So today we are on October 22nd. Starting from the bottom, on November 6th we'll launch our online engagement tool.
Before we get too far into that, when do we get a discussion if we don't want some of these things on here?
Today. This is today, yeah.
So today's the day that we get to scratch out everything we don't want.
That would be really helpful, yeah.
Anyone on your list?
And we're going to be done by 11 o'clock.
But if you're not satisfied that you have enough time.
Yeah,
then
because
tell
I
us
don't
to
want to.
hang on until then we'll come back and have a
Yeah.
discussion.
Well, that's what I'm saying is I don't want to go online with this before we actually deliberate this and give it to the public. It doesn't seem to make any sense.
Well, then that's a good discussion,
That's
because
where that sits on the
there's
back.
2 ways you can do it, Councillor Hong, is to provide them this draft that staff's presented and get feedback and then adjust it, or you can adjust it the way you think council wants it, then get feedback, but you're kind of, at that point, what do you do with that? But so either way it works, it's up to council how you want to do it.
Okay.
Thank you. So for a process, so November 6th we will publish the draft financial plan. November 9, tentatively, we will make another presentation to council. But the big workshop date is scheduled for November 18, followed by the budget e-town November 23rd, leading up to the December 14 financial plan bylaw consideration. And so I'm going to take you through the new tool that we're trying to look at. It's a tool that several other municipalities in BC and across Canada are using. What we see in it is that it's interactive, so people at home are able to interact with the tool and be able to walk through some of the questions and provide feedback on services that the city provides, as well as some budget initiatives that are coming up. We haven't finished working on our own content, but we just want to show you what it would look like when it's said and done.
Councillor Vester?
Thank you. If we could just go back a couple of slides. You mentioned that 2.8%, or sorry, $2.8 million is what our borrowing for 2016 would be. And then we have from 2017 and beyond, I think it was in the neighborhood of $80+ million in capital. And then the next, so I think what you stated was approximately $80 million lost in capital 2017 to 2020. Is that correct?
I think I've lost you, so if you could start from that.
So the 2016 I've got, like I get that $2.8 million in borrowing is what you said for 2016.
It's 2.4 billion.
2.4%.
Yes.
And then in 2017 to 20, to 2020, our capital it was $80-some-odd million forecasted.
All right, thank you. All right, so let's go back.
And I'm just wondering what our borrowing, because there's no graph to say, so in 2017 or 18 or 19 or 20, over that period of time, what our borrowing would require.
In total. Yeah. Okay. All right. So, if you're looking at the entire 5 years, I said it's about 8% of the $180 million. And we're borrowing 2.4 in 2016.
In 2016,
Yeah, and then the difference would be, so in 2016 we're borrowing 2.4, in 2017 we're borrowing about 600,000, and then in 2018 about 12 million.
Okay. And so we will get that on our
Yes, we get that.
spreadsheet. So this is where, and not to delay things, this is where not having that information for me, and how would you know it if I didn't get a chance to ask the questions? So I appreciate the opportunity to ask the questions this morning. But I will likely be wishing to have more of that information.
So the intent of today was to bring this to you at a very high level.
Just an overview.
An overview.
Okay.
It also starts the conversation. It also gives us the opportunity to get you to ask us what you would like to see provided to you for the workshop. So you will have all the information for the workshop that you require.
So, thank you. On that note, can I have the workshop about the fire station? The implications of that too. Just a variation when we do. I'll look at it. I like to see how that impacts the financial value, how it impacts taking off the budget. Thank you. Just so I have it when I have the discussion.
Okay. Okay. This is what Coquitlam is doing. So someone will go in on the website and they will put in their household assessment. It will calculate how much they are contributing towards the services. That's the interaction that we're trying to show. They will be able at home to make adjustments on the amount that they're paying for certain services to see what impact of those adjustments will look like. Some other communities don't provide that. They can also write in to say what they would like to see. In this case, somebody is saying they would like to see more police in the downtown so they can feel safer. And so that information is captured in that interactive form and is sent to us. And they can do that for different services that we offer. So the information that you see here is information that is already in the big budget binder that you are used to. And so we're not reinventing the information. It's the same information. We're just providing people at home the ability to interact with this process. Another example from up east, they'll go through the same process and they will see how much they're paying towards certain services given the amount of their assessment. They can input, like the one before, they can input their assessment for their house, and then they'll be able to also go through providing some feedback in terms of certain services, increases or decreases, and how that would impact the service.
Your worship, Councilor, that's a question.
The other chair is back now.
Gordon. Welcome. Thank you. In regards to this process, great, looks great. But is it just to give, it's not going to end all decision making because we're dealing with a system where we'll staff where, I don't know if we can, but where the results came from, we're part of town. So we're dealing with demographics where we're a market, not marketing, where it's only a certain demographic of privilege to do this process. Because not everyone has computers, not everyone has internet, or even the withal to do this. So I respect that we're going to get some data to help guide, but we're also going to open other processes as well. This isn't the end all decision making.
This is not the end all. So what we're trying to do is to have various or different avenues we can engage.
Exactly.
So
Perfect.
in-town will remain, people can still email us. We have this tool for those who can use it. People can still come to council and address council and put that all together.
A follow-up question, sort of off topic of this, but in the budget conversation is, where does the money come from? Is it reserves where, because my dad's the other night for dinner and he's over 65 and I said, "Have we ever hear you complain about property taxes?" And he says, "Well, I'm over 65, I'm deferring, it's gonna come off your inheritance." So where does that money come from? Like,
Your inheritance.
so he said, "Well, yeah." I didn't know that existed, because I never hear him complain about property tax.
Yeah.
And we got an aging demographic. The reason I say that is we got an older demographic in this part of the world, in our country.
You won't be able to argue with that.
I'm assuming he was talking about the text deferment process.
So how does, like, because if there's no taxes coming off from his house, does that just come from reserves somewhere?
No,
I've never even heard of this.
no. So the tax deferment process, the property tax deferment, what happens is you sign up. The province is running a program where it advances us, it gives us the money,
Okay, so we're getting paid by somebody.
right? And then the property owner, in the hope that when they eventually dispose of the house,
So he croaks, I just pay the province.
No, take it off.
hopefully you.
Or however it works.
Yeah.
Okay.
Should we be watching for this?
Well, I was just concerned that if we were coming to our, I didn't know about even this thing till we were talking about when I dinner. And
No, we do get
a lot of old people in the city, so, okay.
Councilor Hahn.
Thanks.
Thank you.
65 isn't old.
Just with this, are we building our own program? Are we paying somebody to do this, or can we modify this, or how's this program working?
There is a skeleton, obviously, and we are customizing it to fit our own.
One thing I would suggest, like the programs that I use for my bars, is postal code, so we know when they actually enter into this, so we can actually count where they're coming from the postal code. Exact reason what Councillor Joachim has said is I like to know if it's all North End people responding to this online, or if we're having it scattered. So if we can actually get, like, you know, when you go to Staples or anywhere else, they ask you to enter postal code before you start. So I would like to have a postal code so that we can track to see where the respondents, which is also a good thing for tracking. I love data.
I missed to mention exactly that same
Yeah.
point. So at the back of this, we would actually be gathering postal codes, also be gathering some other demographics, age, and stuff
Okay.
like that. And the system is set up that you can only participate once. Right? So you don't have somebody doing this 15 times, right?
So would you be able to enter the notice of assessment number into this?
Yes.
Because that way you have all the data.
Obviously, at this
That will
point-
simplify it. I just don't know what privacy rules are. I have a lot to deal with
Now,
regards
at
to
this
privacy,
point, if you notice, if I were the one, I would take my old assessment and
Yeah.
say, here's my estimate, and I work through that. And that information is just your
Yeah.
information,
Yeah.
right? So at the end of the day, we're not broadcasting this and saying your house is worth this much.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I just, it'd be great if we can use this to gather data for other purposes as well. Right, then we know who's concerned about what, especially if they want less policing in one area and more policing in another, less fire, more fire, then we can gauge in the neighborhood's ability to see what they want. It's kind of general, but that's what election polls do, so it seems to work.
So in short, that's the high level piece that we wanted to bring in front of council. We will require a 1.7% increase in property tax if there are no changes. Thank you.
Oh, Councilor, yeah.
Just a quick question, so I gleaned from this, revenue is 166 million, 60% of it is taxes, 7% coming from user fees by looking at the documents. Ops are going to be 135 million, capital's 37 million. So a $166 million revenue. We have operations 135 and capital 37 million. What's our total expenditure for this year? And I'm going to ask if you know what last year's RGM acquisition was, because that's external to all of this, is it not?
So what we're presenting here is simply City of Nanaimo costs.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
So when we bring back in 2017 or 2016, we would have other requisitions to this, but here we're simply dealing with just our costs.
That my question is,
Yeah.
it's under 66 million, 135 and 37. What is our total budget for City of Nanaimo spending next year? Is it just the 135 and the 37?
It's the 135 and the 37.
So we're almost covered by our revenue sources. Okay, and what, do you have any idea what totally the City of Nanaimo paid last year to the regional district? Because I never seem to get a clear, you don't know?
We'd have to
That's
provide
what
that,
I
yeah.
okay, I can probably find that on my card. Thank you, because that adds to this. We have to get that requisition on top of this, right?
Yes, we would, from our residents.
Thank you.
Same as the library and
Well, that's true. The library also is another expenditure that's not on here. What's that?
Hospital?
We don't do the hospital one here, we do it in the region.
So, Mr. Chair, that concludes Finance's presentation, and if you'd like to, further questions, of course, is great. If you'd like to discuss how we move forward, perfect.
Oh, Councilor Hahn.
Thank you. On page 3 of our presentation binder that we have here, 25.6 million for transportation, including recycling and pedestrian amenities, replacement of the Wilcox Trestle.
Yeah.
Can we talk about the Wilcox Trestle?
Sure.
Are we going to do it? Like seriously, $6 million to replace it? Like, is that the $6 million in? So if I take $6 million, how much was it? 6?
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, are we going to do it?
Is that included in the 25.6? So if I take 6 away, is that down to 20 million? Is my question.
It reduces the budget, but you have obligations for access, of course. And whether you the road's going to cost you the same to get in through the C-span, is our prediction. But that would be a change in direction from council if you decided not to improve the trestle and would have implications for sure with the users on the site.
Councilor Yoder.
I don't think, Ted, that's a misquote. I don't think it's a change in direction. What I've heard since I've been here, I haven't heard, well, I say majority, I can't speak for all, have had no interest in that trestle.
Oh, sorry, Councillor, but it is in the budget because council put it in the budget, and it's been in the budget. It's
Okay, well, then
it was
since-
council's decision to do this when we bought the property.
Since I have a gut feeling then, if this budget from here is gonna go, so then I'd like to make a motion right now then to remove the Wilcox Trestle from this budget, just so we're clear, because I don't think if we go through this meeting, it won't, I agree with have to be road work and stuff, I get that. It makes more sense to do that, but nonetheless, I don't want us to pass this, whatever gets passed in, and then all of a sudden saying, oh, you guys said the Wilcox Trestles would go, because that's what would
So
happen.
the implications of that, because it's a public road, you own the bridge and it provides access to the land, it's the only access to the portland. There's implications to saying, we'd have to shut it down when it's not passable, and I don't know what the implications for the users are.
Well, then common sense, if you start the roadway at the same time before this thing dies, and
I agree with you, the roadway is gonna cost about the same, that's why we're working on them in parallel.
so wouldn't we safer language for this council, so we're not boxed in, which seems like to be a pattern, is saying access to NPA lands and just have a ballpark price? That would make more common sense, so we have options, so we're not just married to the trestle with something hell bent on. So,
Well, you always have control, but up until the point we issue a contract to repair it, you're always in control.
so I just know today this isn't waving in their face. So I want to make sure we get
It's
accurate.
not
on it.
waving in your face, this is council's budget. If you don't want it in the budget and you think that there's reasons and you have all the information to make the decision, there's no wrong decision. I don't think you have all the information. If you'd like a report on the trestle, we're happy to provide it, but just to pull it out of the budget now without understanding all of the implications, I think would be wrong.
And we should have, just to wrap up, Mr. Chair, we're long overdue to have a meeting with the NP on a variety of things, and I see there on our agenda the other night, maybe put some other items on there, because we've got to build that relationship to work together on there. And maybe there's room for cost share, and all this other stuff, but we have not had a real conversation with anybody on this. So I just don't want us to get boxed into the trestle. I hear what you're saying. I get we got to provide access, and we should keep our language pretty loose so we have options. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilor Kett.
No, I can agree with the language that you used of $6 million for access to the Wilcox property would be maybe a clearer indication of this council. So I would support change of that language to $6 million to access the Wilcox land.
It
That-
really is a strategic discussion, right? Because council has a bunch of commitments, one of which is to, and whether it's debt or not debt, there's a commitment to provide access to a ferry terminal that you have on the McGad Marine site, which is over the trestle. You have the NPA, you have a commitment for access to SFN's lands that is at the end of that road. And until we finish negotiating how we're going to do it, I don't, there's no obligation, it's just got to be accounted for in the budget on the liability associated with it.
A follow-up from me on that. I appreciate the fact that if it burned down tomorrow, we'd have to make a decision immediately, and we're not pressed at that point now. And that could easily fall down in a limited shape. That's what we've been told. It wouldn't take much to knock that baby down. So we would have to make, I think this does push us. The Wilcox property is huge. We've got to move forward on it. I just think it's a language. It's all that we support.
Yeah. But don't put a price point there, because others that we're hell bent on spending, we got to spend up to $6 million. Don't put a price point.
Well, you need something in the budget. Even when we did the Colliery Dams, we put money, proposed money was coming in.
Up to.
Yeah, it's one of the things about capital planning is that you try and look into the future on what liabilities you have. You try and put it in the budget so that you're not having the year that the budget comes up that all of a sudden staff say, well, you know what, to repair this trestle, and we say it's 6 to 10 million, and then your budget has to find the money. This is a way to actually strategically plan for a capital planning exercise.
Just don't like the word trestle.
Councillor Thorpe.
As soon as others finish talking. Thanks, Chair. I share Councillor Yoakum's concern about this, but I guess I don't have a real problem with the wording, because replacement of the Wilcox trestle to me can be read as if we opt to replace the actual trestle, fine. If we opt to replace it with a roadway or other access, so be it. We're going to have to provide access one way or the other. So I still see some flexibility in that wording, so I don't have a problem with that.
Councillor Pratt.
That was exactly my point.
Mayor McKay.
Yeah, I just, I hear what Councillor Yoakum's saying, that rather, if we leave it in as trestle, then he's concerned that we're going to get stuck with trestle. So if we would have changed that terminology to say Wilcox property access contingency, something like that.
Work for me. It's just,
That'd be fun.
I just don't like the word. I don't want to
Councillor
go.
Vespa.
Thank you. Well, this is the first time that I've seen this document. It's not the first time that I've seen some of this information, but the first time that I've seen this document. So on pages 2 and 3, practically everything on pages 2 and 3 for me would be a strategic planning session to discuss. And when I read $25.6 million for the trestle for annual road rehabilitation and cycling and pedestrian amenities, I need to know specifically what we've approved for trailways and connections of bicycle paths and so on and so forth. We have a consultant group off working on with staff on South End connectivities. I rode that path to see where the options we had. I think we had like 5 different options in the 1.4 kilometers or whatever it was. So for me, just to, because I know what happens out of this is that if we don't ask for anything or suggest any alterations, then although by receiving this, that we're providing direction to proceed doing this. So for me, this is a strategic session to discuss these topics independent of one another, to arrive at the numbers and to arrive at the timeline, whether that's a fire hall, whether that's police officers, whether that's transportation and cycling and all those other improvements. Are we wishing to become identified as strategically as one of our top priorities as a green community that encourages all? So what is it that we're going to hang our hat on for the next 3 to 5 years in this financial plan that we have discussed as a council, this council, to proceed with doing or not, because we haven't had that discussion. And while I appreciate all of the work that's gone into this, and all the work that will go into this from this day forward, I think it's important that we have that session. And if we call it a budget strategic session, which I assume that that's what this is the first time I've seen this. So, and I think that's the same for every other person sitting at this table.
So, Your Worship, we want to serve you, so it won't be one session. You'll need many, many sessions to get through this. And that's fine. Council, we need to commit the time to that. You'll be redoing it again with the core review. That's a service level that the core review is going to get into details. But it's okay, if council would like to start that, we should set up a service level review like we had 2 years ago and start going through line by line, service by service, and see where we get to.
Thank you. Well, whether it's line by line or not, but maybe it's department by department, but maybe it's bullet point by bullet point, which could eliminate the line by line. But the $25.5 million for including recycling and pedestrian amenities, and then for me, then it becomes priorities. Then it becomes what can we complete. Like, so from beginning to end, like I'd like to take something from beginning to end and finish it instead of just starting it and then our priorities change and I get all that, the economy does what the economy does. That's what happened to us with the fire plan. I get it. Like we ran into all the problems after 05 and 07, 08 and blah, 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 blah. So, but I think it's an important conversation for this council to have a roll up our sleeves on a strategic about what is and purpose.
So there are two different things, though, and I want to say that a strategic discussion about the budget is very high level. It's actually what we're doing now. If you want to know details about the 25.6 million, that's roll up your sleeve and get a service level review. That's completely different, and that takes a lot of time for you to understand and to make decisions about. So if you remember when we did the service level review 2 years ago, almost 100% of the projects you're going to look at are asset management. There's very, very minute amount of our budget that is new, and I'll take the example you're talking about the new trail. The new trail that you're referring to, is just partly funded if we did it, because it's like $5 million from this. It would never be completely funded. We'd never do it all at once. So it's just what can we achieve within the existing money, and it's mostly asset management, just repairing roads and repairing trails and that sort of thing. So I think that's what you'll find at the end of it is you'll be then making decisions about how quickly do you do asset management, which you can't not do. You can just do at a certain rate. And we proposed a budget that has some time frames associated with how we move forward with the asset management.
Thank you. Well, I don't disagree that it's high level, and I don't disagree that, but I do disagree that, and with all respect, that we can do some strategic planning for the 2016 budget while we're in the core services review analysis that's going to be undertaken. Because we have to. It's November. We're spending money for 2016 now. So, and you take the two bullets there. It's $33 million for Boxwood transportation, and then transportation above it. It's $32 million. So we can break down that pretty quick. We can break down those two numbers pretty quick. What's involved in that $32 million over the next 5 years? We can do that. And then all the other stuff becomes additional to that, of course. And then deciding what it is that we really do want to make a priority. Like, well, okay, we don't want to not complete the trail so that there's for the cycling. We really don't want to have gaps that are 2 kilometers long, and where do you go after you get to the end of the trail? Now what happens? So maybe we should, and I'm just throwing stuff. Maybe we complete the whole trail. I don't know. But without having those conversations and finding out where people's preferences are and priorities, then I'm challenged. Like maybe I'd rather. Some people would rather see the 16 or whatever new RCMP officers hired, and if that means that the trail has to stop for 5 years or 10 years, well, that's a priority. Money's got to come from somewhere. So if I may just ask a question, it's just thoughts, because I think we need to think. The 2 point, when we add the water, sewer, and garbage into 2016, we're at a 2.7 estimated percent increase without the RDM. And then in 2017, when we're 4.1% without water, sewer, and garbage, is it reasonable to assume that we're really 5.1%?
What will be adding?
So in 2016, we estimate that we're at a 1.7% increase. And then when we add water, sewer, and garbage in 2016, it basically increases it by 1%. So then in 2017, we're anticipating a 4.1% increase without water, sewer, and garbage, and without the RDM. So we're really 5.1% plus whatever the RDM.
Okay.
Correct?
Correct.
Because it doesn't naturally doesn't specify that.
And there's a reason why I don't do that. Is to separate the decisions and deal with them separately and deal with them together later. Because what happens then is, because you're in a multi-jurisdictional taxing system, you could actually cut your own services so you can pay for somebody else's services to go on. So if you don't separate them from the beginning, you don't cloud yourself with that conversation. Bring them together. It's a relevant conversation. Say, well, at the end of the day, how much is this really going to hit the taxpayer? But we will definitely bring these together at the end when we have the analysis.
And the other reason is that the user rate is based on how much you use the water, of course, so people have the choice on it.
Sure. I completely respect why they're separated. I understand that. But what you also alluded to is that when the consumer, when the taxpayer, when we're saying, hey, we're doing a great job, we only increased your taxes by 1.7%. or 4.1% or otherwise, but when you add up all the other stuff, that be it by usage or be it by whatever, it's still a tax increase at the end of the day. We just call them different things, parcel tax. They're called different things, user fees. It's all increases in services received by the city that affect the taxpayer, the homeowner.
Correct.
I understand that, but I'm just saying, for me, when it's 1.7, well, it's 2.7, and then we add on the RDN and hospital, all that other stuff, now it's 3.6, or whatever the number ends up being. So I think the consumer out there needs to understand, if they don't, the information that we're telling them.
So there's you just heard something to think about too, is the consumer and whether you want to survey them to establish whether they are satisfied with the services.
Well, when we do that thing that Coquitlam and Guelph and everybody does, then they'll be able to let us know if they like how much they pay.
Councilor Hong.
Oh, thank you. Just a couple of stuff. I'm actually liking the idea of doing things line by line, just so when we do the core review, I can understand it, because I don't want to read the core review. It's costing us a lot of money, and then they're going to give me this information. I'm going to say, what does this mean? Because I might not understand the detail it's going to go to. If we do this line item by line, it's like, oh, I know that number right there related to this, and I get it. So it's great to know how our budget works, because it's the one thing that we do control. So I'm actually excited to figure out what line by line things work like. So when we do the core review and we look at the results of the core review, I'll understand the core review a lot better than I will if I don't know this information. And I wish we had done this last year, then probably wouldn't need to do it this year. Question though, on page 3 it says provides capital investment. Is that, all these numbers here, is that just 2016 or is that through 2020? Is there a little bit of mix of both in there?
There's 3%.
Yeah, just
This
the
is 5 years.
Okay, so it's a 5 year. So like this $25.6 million is 5 years. It's not.
It's over 5 years.
Okay, so all these are over 5 years. It'd be great if we know what we're working with 2016.
Correct.
Because if we're doing the 2016 budget right now, it's the most important. I get we have to plan ahead, but I just don't know what's relative in these projects. Like the $7 million Foxwood project access between Boxwood and Bevan Roads. Where's Bevan Roads?
The south entrance of Bevan Park. They want to go from Boxwood and Northfield and cut a curve over to the south entrance of Bevan Park. And that's
Where the church is, isn't it?
No, around the church.
Oh,
The church
yeah.
will become the traffic island that were between Northfield and Lynch. So it cuts from Boxwood and goes out over the old swamps and
Yeah.
cuts out and they'll put a lit intersection in that.
To avoid.
Thorn Road, well, there's a photograph, and then there's a little road off of Northfield into the subdivision area in the middle of it.
Yeah, and like I said, other ones, like I said, Yacht Club, construction of waterfront sidewalk. This Port Teeter still on here, this $12 million, is there, what are we doing with that? Like, I'd just like some direction on, are we leaving it? Is it in the budget? Is it not in the budget? I don't know where that fits.
So through the chair, I think the conversation we're having now, we intended to have it on November 18. So remember what we said, the idea was today was to give you this high level, and then we'll provide you the details. We'll have a council workshop on November 18, where you actually have the list of projects, let's say 2016, these are the projects in 2016, these are projects in 2017. Then you look at it across and say, well, we would like to add this project, or we would like to take this project, and look across. So that conversation we are still going to have.
But the CAO said we should make decisions today.
He is looking for, and he's looking to say, well, if you things that you're saying, and you picked up one and say, give us an option when you come back where you don't have the file.
Yeah.
Right. That's what we're looking for. We'll get back to the details on November 18, where we give you all the details. And
Okay.
you can walk through that. So if anything clicks in your mind that says, oh, we would like to see a scenario with this or without this, that's probably the conversation we will have today.
Okay, well, like I said, I'd like to take the Port Theater one out with or without it. I don't know, we're waiting for them to do stuff, so I don't know if that affects it, because it's only $4 million in ours.
Now, the other thing that we have to understand, remember when I looked through here, I said to you, you're paying about 84% of the 5-year capital plan
Yeah,
from cash.
yeah.
From money that you have
In reserve.
in reserve. So it has no impact on your tax today
No.
or in the future. It's money that's now there.
Yeah,
right?
but I would
So-
like to move some other money to infrastructure if we could, because apparently that's a huge thing, and you said the equipment repair, and that caused our taxes to increase, and if we can plan that better for the long term by eliminating some of these other things that are discretionary or not, or if they're actually committed, it'd be nice to know. Like I said, long-term planning.
Councilor Kip?
Thank you. Yeah, I guess it's tough for staff to interpret what 9 of us want. Ted has 9 bosses sometimes and he has to interpret from. I like speed dating. We did a 1-day session over in the annex a couple of years ago where I'll say go to page 17, maybe the thing, it's one department, which is community development, for example. Community development comes in, they put their stuff, their core service, they explain it, they talk about their expenditure and what their budget change was, they talk about their revenues, they talk about that, they talk about their FTEs and percentages of change and plead for their department, and then poof, and we did it in 1 day with the council, 8 hours, we had breaks and that, people came in, and I call it speed budget. So that was a good one too for me, and I think it would be a good one for this to go over, and then if we need more information, we can pick a department we're concerned with, or an area we're concerned with, or a priority. So for my view, a 1-day session we could go over, and a long, hard work day, we'll probably be able to go through it, and then we can develop more questions out of that too. I say for Councilor Hong's concerned with it. I mean, we've been asking for this, but have we been reading it, or are we just waiting for the session, or have we been going over it and understanding everything that's going on? So from my perspective, I do like to see the RDN in it. I mean, from my perspective, it's like, I can't go home and budget and say to my wife, oh, well, this is our house budget, I didn't include the boat, because that's not really here, it's down at the wharf. I pay for that separately. So I like to see all those costs. And what I heard today that scared me the most is next year, 4.1. 2016 ain't bugging me right now at 1.7 or 2, but 4.1 and start tacking on all the other things. That starts to concern me. I know from the RDN we've got a sewage treatment money coming, $80 million and stuff we're going to be paying over the next while too. So from my perspective, I'd like to know those. And then fee decline is probably a concern for me too, is if our, I mean, we're talking in here about building the new Departure Bay Center and rebuilding it, community center, one of our budgeted items, or thought about items. Well, if we're not getting good rentals at Bevan or other places, is that a priority to rebuild that building? Do we know that? And I worked out of that building, and I know what it's like. It was old 10 years ago, but we let it decline. Sometimes we manifest the decline of some of these buildings because our asset management plan isn't in order. We're not spending on what we have and keeping my old truck running versus, oh, I'll just go and buy a new one. Right? So for me, I have concerns with how we deal with fee declines, budget increases next year, 4.1%. That's a shocker to me. And then declining down to the election. But to see it balance out somehow. So thank you.
So I don't know if we talked about it, I'm sorry, I was out dealing with something, but of course next year is all about fire. That's the 4.1% is the start of the grant about fire. So that's not a new issue, that's just an issue that council needs to decide on one way or the other, and do it or don't do it. So I'm going to try again, because I think this is really critical. The budget I tried to get staff to bring forward was, of course, no new services, because that was your direction. And there's actually a decline for sure, otherwise we wouldn't be at 1.7%, because 1% is wages alone, and we have the 4 new RCMP officers, and we have I think the 200,000 for the shelters in it that council wants to consider. So that one we need to have a discussion with. So I think at 1.7%, it's going to be tough without getting into service level discussions and the detail of each department. And is that valuable to you? And I know, and the answer is probably you're going to have to tell me yes, it is or it isn't, based on the pressure you get from the elected to answer the question. I understand that. I'm just saying, is there value in that, knowing that you are going to go through one of the largest, most detailed reviews this organization has ever had, and it's going to, anything that you change, it's going to review anyway. So is there value in that? And that comes down to really philosophy on whether you like what's presented as less than status quo and moving forward and dealing with it later, and focusing your efforts on strategic planning and talking about some of these bigger issues that are tied into the capital planning for the next 5 to 10 years. That's probably a way more important discussion for this council to really get their head around. So that's again my pitch for that. I understand if you want to do something more detailed, that's fine. We're here to help.
Councilor Yoakum.
Thank you, I'll be quick here. I get the exercise, and I think it's a little bit, we have to put money away. I get that for capital and asset, make sure roads are maintained, and water and the pipes and whatnot. But we have somewhat backwards. I think we have to have that plan Ted just touched on, so we can get our goals and objectives. I heard one council member talk about green space. I would like to maybe explore solar energy. I don't know, but we haven't had almost a year to have a real conversation. What are each of our goals are we like to accomplish? So we're just basically scrambling. It feels like, and we haven't had a chance before. Some of our initiatives are what we'd like to explore at least. So it's like those Monday morning meetings, like on the agenda meeting. Well, and after we start having to say in the agenda, but we don't. So we have to have that session. I know I'm a broken record and it may be tedious and some don't want to hear, but the reality is we have not set the goals and objectives. I know our strat plan's up this year, and I look forward to having get working the next one. Because to sit here and look at these numbers, who's to say those are our priorities or those should be the best priorities? Like the question I would have was on the bottom piece where it says does not include any changes in the outline above. And we all know that garbage automations is a big item, and as we just purchased 2 and possibly in this exploring and purchasing 4 more. And the park and service, those bullets there aren't included in these either. So I'd like to know how much more those bullets would cost if we were going to put that in the budget. You know, that line right there? Correct. Yeah, so, I know we have it broken down somewhere. So that's going to add it up. Well, that's not in this presentation, those volume costs there. On page 3 still, people. So, Board, I just wanted to touch on those things where we're just saying, yeah, let's go and buy a trestle and let's do this and do that. And we haven't said, well, let's talk about what's our initiative, our goals. And my last one, I'm really perplexed about partnering with the yacht club. How
if they need anything done, would they do it themselves unless it's our responsibility? Like, because that's sort of optically, sending taxpayer money in yacht club, just, it's a bad, optically a bad message. In my view, just my view. But anyways, I can go on and on and on. There's other speakers. Thank you, Gord.
Councilor Pratt.
Thank you. We're a bit all over the place here. One of the questions I guess I wanted to ask staff was, this budget, what I know about this budget is it's been based on the planning of the last 5 years. This budget's now into a brand new budget, 216 to 220, right? 220, 220, whatever. And it is based on the priorities of past councils. That's the reality. That's how we work. And every year we change it by adding another year onto the end and looking at our priorities. Our strategic plan is up at the end of this year. We need a new strategic plan, and that is definitely going to create new priorities and maybe get rid of some old priorities. My question to staff is, does that strategic planning happen before or after the core review?
Well, council, we talked about that before we went down the path of a core review. I think ideally it would have been good to have some direction for a person reviewing services, because to Councillor Kipp's point, 90% of what we do is not a core service.
Yeah.
So everything is, but over time, the community demands services and council approves services, so you get to where we are today with the services expected by the community. So to start clawing back services has never happened. In fact, every year we add services. The $200,000 for an emergency shelter is a new service council did. Regulating cats and dogs is a new service council did. So it never goes backwards. And then you do a core review to look at reducing services or changing service delivery. So the 5-year capital plan just keeps incrementally going forward based on your strategic priorities. So ideally, I think it would have been good to have your strategic plan done. There's nothing wrong with starting that discussion now. But at the end of the day, even if you came up with a strategic priority, the core review is going to come with recommendations. Your strategic priority, I guess, might say that protective services is your #1 priority. The core review might come back and say, don't build another fire hall. So then what do you do with that information?
Thank you. So that's kind of my point, is this core review is going to make a huge difference and impact the budget moving forward, or not, depending on whether we accept the core review at face value and adopt everything in it, or we take certain parts of it, or whatever. And until that core review is done, it's pretty hard to set strategic priorities. Because other than, there's certain ones that we can set that really are not going to have anything to do with the core review. And then there's others that are definitely going to be affected by it.
And I think, keep in mind, there's 2 parts to the strategic planning. There's the strategic plan, which talks about your core values and pillars, and then there's your strategic initiatives that flow out of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the strategic initiatives I think councils generally gravitate to in terms of what do you want to do, what do you want to be, what are your legacies, what do you want to build. But in our case, our strategic initiatives, other than Fast Ferry and a hotel, and the Wilcox Yard, is really about water, and delivering water to the community in the next 15 years when it runs out is a mega project, mammoth. And that's never going to change. It's in the current strategic plan, and if it's not in the next one, I would be very surprised.
So just as a follow-up then, I totally agree with that, and those are the conversations I'm really looking forward to, because that will give us that really big picture view that allows us then to filter down to where we are today. Because right now we are where we are because of decisions that have been made before this. And for anybody to sit at the table and say, I don't want to have that, or I don't want to have this, that is a personal bias that you have. But I think until we change our strategic direction until or the priorities that came out of our strategic plan, we need to remain committed to what's happening and then change it as we move along. So we really are kind of all over the place here.
So I have one final thing on that, because strategic planning, as I said, we tend to gravitate to initiatives which can come and go without much effort. You have to be strategic about how you do it if you want to unwind some of the stuff. But strategic planning in terms of $200 million capital budget, if you take a sharp turn and you change direction very quickly, that's a challenge, because services, and I'm talking about service delivery and capital projects, it takes a long time to readjust the culture of your organization and the strategic alignment of where you want to go. And that's why, and this council is, for the first year, we're really not gelling on what it is this council wants to do, so that I can align the staff to say, this is where council wants to go. This is how we're going to do our work plans and how we're going to do it. So it's a very important discussion. The core review does throw a little bit of a wrench in this. So it's a tough thing to really get aligned until you get through that kind of inward-looking investigation of the service delivery model. It's essential if you're going to actually come together, I think, on this council and decide where you want to go.
Council report.
Thanks, Chair. A couple of comments as I've been listening to the discussion. First of all, heard RDN mentioned, and I certainly agree that RDN tax rates affect Nanaimo taxpayers, obviously, but I don't feel that what the RDN does or may do should directly influence decisions that we need to make for Nanaimo taxpayers. I heard a concern from Councillor Kipp about tax increases in 16 as compared to 17, and I have that concern as well, and I would be interested in looking to see if we could even out those 2 years a little bit more. But I guess mainly I come back to what Mr. Mima said, and I really appreciate your presentation, Victor. I thought that was very well done. This is an overview from well above, and I've heard that we're going to have a discussion on November 18th, was it? Which would get into more detail. At this point, I would like all of the bullets that I see on page 3 included in those discussions. I don't want to take anything off the table right now. I think they all need to be looked at and discussed, and if we're going to do that on November the 18th, then I'm comfortable with that. If this is an overview, a starting point, these are all things that I think we do need to discuss, and we can move forward from there. So that's my thought. Thank you.
Councilor Kipp.
No.
Councilor Brennan.
Thank you. I think that if we should be prepared on November 18th with having already had a discussion about what we want to do and what our goals and priorities are. And otherwise, how do we draft the budget? And so I'm agreeing with Councillor Yoakum. I think we need to have this strategic plan discussion ahead of time. I think there isn't a conflict between having a strategic plan and having a core review, because I think the strategic plan says this is what we want to do, these are our goals and priorities. And then the core review basically, I think, would say, well, how does our budget and service levels fit with our goals? So that's how I think any particular council puts their stamp on things. If we don't know what we want to achieve, we won't know if the budget, when we're doing the core review, whether the budget actually addresses what we want. So my thinking is we should have this strat plan discussion before we develop our budget, or to help us develop our budget. And secondly, on the RDN, I just actually sent a message to Paul Thorkelson, the CAO, because I need to know, and you people who are on the RDN may know the answer to this, but do the City of Nanaimo votes on a weighted vote? Are they the majority? Are we in 100% control at the RDN about what our tax bill from the RDN will be?
on financial issues, I believe,
Well, that's budget, right? Financial issues is the budget, is the tax requisition. So every time we send 7 people out to the RDN, you're in control. You don't want to see a big tax requisition from the RDN, then don't have a big tax requisition from the RDN. It's something that I think we believe that the RDN is a separate entity from us. It isn't, and in fact, I think, but I'm not sure, and that's why I asked Paul to confirm that, I think on financial issues, Nanaimo's weighted votes are the majority. So we are in 100% control. So it's not logical or rational to worry about, oh my goodness, the RDN tax requisition is going to come and hit us out of left field, because we're in control. So those are the comments I have about this one.
Okay, thanks. If I recall, we're 35 of 65 votes. So we do carry the majority. Unless one person's away or votes against, we're done. So we're just marginally ahead. One of the things that I'm hearing, and I agree with it to a point, but I'm concerned about the ultimate consequence, and that is, if we were to take, I'd like to see us not do our budget in isolation of everything else, as Councillor Bestwick has put forward, but I'm concerned about the consequences. So if we look at the RDN, and we've got the Nanaimo Hospital District, we've got separate from our budget the Regional Library Board, we've got the school board separate from ours, but they all affect the taxpayer's purse. Every one of those groups has a 5-year financial plan. Every one of them's got big projects coming up, lots of capital projects. So I would like to see some of those numbers come together on a single presentation, and what the, you know, and what the assessments would be for an average citizen. So we've got Nanaimo sitting over here, and we've got hospital district, we've got RDN, we've got school board, all of that stuff. We can start using some of those for loosely guiding where we go. I'm concerned that if we don't have control over those other ones, that we're going to start reducing services significantly in the city of Nanaimo, because we've got this imaginary number at the top of our head as to where we want tax increases to go. But I think it would certainly be helpful to have everybody's financial plans sitting there on a presentation together.
Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. I agree with Councillor Brennan, Councillor Thorpe, Councillor Yocum, Councillor Pratt, Councillor Kipp, Councillor Hong. I agree with everybody's comments. I think, and Mayor Kipp, for me, this is about strategic planning, financial planning, budget considerations. This is a brand new council. We have carryover clearly from previous councils' directions and initiatives. This council needs one. This council needs to have its goals and objectives and initiatives clearly stated, and whether it may have been more opportune to have it previous to now, or maybe more opportune to have it post the core services review, or may it be more opportune. The most important thing that this council needs to do right now is communicate. And the only way we can communicate is to meet to discuss where the overlaps are with strategic planning, where the overlaps are with budget and financial planning, because they're all related. They're not independent of one another. They're all related. And if we don't have a clear direction or mandate to our staff about what this council would like to see happen, we may not be able to make changes from previous council's initiatives from the 2013 5-year plan, 14, 15, 16. But we need to address what we would like to entertain at a high level. And there may be 2 or 3 or one extremely high level project that we're just not going to let our hands off of. There might be some changes that occurred, not unlike what happened after the collapse in 27, 8, 9. We're still coming out of it, and that changed a lot of the things that we did in 05. I think Di and I were sitting, I'm not sure if Jimmy was there at the time, when we did the fire plan and the 10-year fire plan and all that stuff. So things change, I get that. But it's so important that I think that this group of people here at this table discuss what our strategic plan is at a high level, with capital projects included, at a high level, that how it may or may not impact our 5-year plan at a high level, to advance some commonalities and collaborations with other stakeholders in the community, and we lead it. And we take leadership on it. But without communication, and here we are today, I'm not sure how many pages this is, 33 pages, and Councillor Thorpe and Councillor Pratt and Councillor Yoakum and Councillor Bestwick, this is my first observation of this. So I look forward to November the 18th, but like Councillor Brennan, I want to have a meeting before then to flesh out some of the stuff that we're trying to flesh out in a 1-hour window or a 2-hour window and then make a decision on it. I'd like to flesh some of that stuff out, please, before we come back on November the 18th. So I'd like to have that meeting if we possibly could. And roll up our sleeves and discuss what is contained inside this document with all respect. And if it's an all-day session, terrific. If it's a half-day session, terrific. We need to do that. Thank you.
Councillor Hahn.
Thank you. I agree with Councillor Bestwick, and I agree with Councillor Brennan, actually. I think a strategic plan is very important. I honestly don't know what to expect from the core review. I have no expectations, actually. I'm not going to plan our next budget or anything on the core review. I'm hoping that the core review is going to say that we're running a great city. I don't know. I have no idea what it's going to say. I don't want to wait, because we don't know when it's going to get done. I would like a strategic plan. I would like to know what we're going to move forward with. To say that we're waiting for the core review just doesn't seem to make any sense. I think we all have ambitions and what we want to move forward with when we got elected. It's been a year now. My platform, I like to see some move on when I promised the people. If I opted to run again next year, like, what did I do? Like, hardly anything. I want to achieve, or even move in the direction. I don't even care about achieving anything. I would like to move into the direction that we were all voted to do. And we all had different directions, but it would be nice to move forward. I don't think any of us promised that we're going to leave things the way they are. I don't know, but that wasn't mine. So I would like to move forward, and I think we need. And I thought today was a strategic planning session. So I would like that conversation, sooner than later. And like I said, I know that we have scheduling conflicts, but Mondays always seem to be great, and I'm willing to do a 8 a.m. or 8:30 a.m. until 1 a.m. after council if need be, and have these discussions, because we need the discussions. And like Councillor Bestwick said, communication is great. Whether we get anything accomplished or not, at least we're communicating. It's great. Communication works wonders. So, thank you.
Councillor Kipp.
I guess I'm on the whole budget issue overall. We don't sit down. I don't care about any icons left with my name on it. I can park after somebody else when I'm dead. I can't separate the RDN, and I can't say we're in control, because we would totally disagree on 5,000 hours of added transit when this kid sees empty buses, big ones, big buses with only 5 people on them, a small bus with 1 person on it, buses driving through town. Yeah, I mean, I talked to the kids trying to go to the university from Townside Road. It's got to go all the way downtown, big bus, and it's busy. And so we wouldn't always agree unless we sit here at this table and agree on stuff and bring it forward and stick to it. We have nothing out there but our individuals. And when I go out there, I wear a different hat. I'm allowed to be a regional district director, and I voted against council direction over time because of my own values out there. So to say we have a vote and we got it and we're in control, we could be in control here, the same thing, but that's not. There's a whole different realm of that. So to separate the RDL and not have it, this is illogical to me and not rational. And I believe we need to have that. So from my perspective, the strategic plan is hugely important. The ones we did with the pillars we did before were great. I'm not certain culture was in it, but the culture committee came forward and pushed and got a great cultural thing going in our community. We've done a really good job, and we're doing better with that. So for me, we need to sit down and hammer this out, dig it out, flush it out, work on some things. We probably agree on 90% of what we want to do in the community, and the other 10 is the tough stuff. The stuff we might disagree with totally on how we do things or what we do. So from my perspective, we have floundered for a year because of relationships, personalities, me being harassing or whatever I do, to whoever I do it to. Because for me, the core review should have been done a few years ago along with our asset management. It's been delayed. We had unions in talking to us, or the people are inviting the people coming and telling us how it's good. I've been accused that it was a con from the beginning. So you want to sit down and make up some rules here? Let's do it. Let's sit down in a session. Let's kick everybody out, roll our sleeves up, and come up with it. Because we keep asking and keep talking about it, it doesn't seem to be happening. So I am truly disappointed with how we're operating like everyone else. I think every one of us has the same feeling. I agree with everyone at the table. We're somewhat floundering. I mean, we turn our backs on each other. The camera's on us today. And it'll prove some things just by the notion of the camera and our body language and that. So we got some growing up to do, I guess, and I got some growing up to do too, because I'm frustrated as hell with this group. It's causing me to lose sleep over not moving forward. And all the stuff in the papers and all the websites going after us, it's bugging me big time. And the reason is we can't get along. So I don't know if we can do any good, but so I can keep moving and vote on things I want, and I will bring up whatever I want to get rid of. I'll bring up motions where we can and try and get the move forward. And that's the way I'm at it from here on in.
Your Worship, one thing to think about a strategic plan is that I'm here and council wants to get in a room and talk about this in a closed session, and I think that's a great starting point. But I think a strategic plan to be successful needs public input, it needs to have the community engaged, and it's a process, and it's a long process, and it has to be full of transparency with the engagement, and that in itself will be a challenge. If council, I think actually what council is referring to is that you would like to talk about the initiatives, strategic initiatives, which is really a little bit separate from the strategic priorities. But I think you should think about that, because a strategic plan, there's no way you're going to come out to the community and say, here's our strategic plan, and they haven't added any equipment into it. I don't think that'll go well with the community.
Councilor Brennan.
The only thing I want to say is that to me the strategic plan or the development of the strategic initiatives is not the place where we explore budget. The strategic plan, I think, is higher level than that. We look at what do we want to do, and what are our goals, and what are our priorities, and we do that, and then we use that as the framework for the budget. But I think they're two different discussions, and I think if we try to take pieces of the budget and talk about them in the strategic plan, we'll miss the boat. It needs to be a different discussion, and then we see how much that will cost us to implement that plan. And we may decide that it's too wide-ranging, or it has to be a longer term, whatever, but they're two different discussions from my point of view.
Councilor Yoakum.
So let's be quick in regards to the RDN conversation is, in this conversation, there's new personalities and some maybe part of the problem at times. I don't know, but one thing I don't feel bad about is the best interest of the city. And whether we are on each other's Christmas cards lists or not, doesn't matter to me. We got a city to go through. If votes are 5-4 all year long, so be it, or 8-1. As long as they're providing, pushing good initiatives for the best interest of all corners of the city, that's what I'm all about. And we keep getting emails, dysfunctional. If I hear that word one more time, I'm starting to wonder what dysfunction is. So I believe dysfunction is not having, and there's people in this room, and it's quite bizarre. We have not had a goal and objectives, visionary, call it whatever you want, strat plan, call it whatever, all the above. Not once. I got elected almost a year ago, November 15th, and we not have had it once. So it's really hard to govern when you can't have create that space. So we got to create that space, and if we can't create that space amongst the city, then we've got to create it as councillors, and just do it. We got to work a weekend. I agree with Jerry. We'll do it what we can. And in regards to the RDN, numerous months ago I suggested we should have a conversation on RDN and be on the same page, and we have not even. I don't know if we're allowed to meet discuss RDN because I don't know if I should say it now because it'll be a lawyer set my way. But nevertheless, we have space to have conversation. We have not met once to talk about what do we like to see at RDN. Di is right. You're absolutely right, Di. When you say, why haven't we had a conversation? We want to keep the big tax down, or what do we want a goal of the city? Our goal of our city? No, we have not met once on the RDN, which is a apology. I just want to put that on record. So twice now, these two initiatives. It's hard to govern when we can't meet and discuss. If I have to call lead the meeting or someone else, let's take the initiative, let's do it. We have to do it for the best interest of the city. Thank you, Gordon.
Okay.
I'm just wondering if, I know that we do have some in-camera business that we need to deal with. I wonder if we should be going into that, if we want to carry on the conversation further.
I just have some final comments. I agree the strategic plan, it's important, but it's not important to the budget per se. It may be more important in the future. Core review is far more important to the budget than what we're discussing, but it likely isn't going to have any impact until 2017, so we're focusing on the 2016 budget. There's a lot of really good comments here, and I need to make another comment. Yeah, we're moving in camera. I was informed yesterday that we would not be. This morning I opened my email and find out we are going to be. Now, I have another job, and I have an appointment scheduled at 11:30 with a client with my other job that I cannot cancel because when I make these appointments, I can't. Not all of my people have phones. So here we are coming up with something I had vaguely heard about, and we're going to move in camera to discuss it. And that's another part of the problem. We're always adding things at the last minute. And that's where we're not getting stuff done. When we hear we're not moving forward city business, we're moving it forward. We just get a lot of it added on to us at the last minute that we can't move forward right now. So anyway, I'm looking forward to the budget discussions. I didn't get a chance to read this because I was trying to pay attention to who wanted to speak, keep the speakers list, so I will do that later on today when I get home. And look forward to one of the discussions on the budget. Thank you. Councilor Yoakum.
Thanks, Gordon. I'm just wondering why we're going to camera. I sent an email last night, late hour, but I wondered what's the in-camera agenda. I didn't receive it yet. So what are we going to camera for? Are we dealing with a labor matter or business transaction?
I think first we would have to.
That's pretty easy. Doesn't say anything, Jerry.
Yeah.
So acting mayor, so
Do we move receipt of the information given to us,
Yes.
the presentation?
So moved. Second there.
All those in favor? Opposed? None?
I move to endorse the public engagement process outlined in attachment 1. So that's part 2 of the recommendation. I'm not ready to move the first part right now. Move number 2.
Seconder, Councilor Hahn, page 3 of the agenda, which you don't have.
Oh, it's still enough addition. Yeah, that one right there, that one. Green one.
What's in my agenda?
Yeah. Staff recommendation.
No, that's a property tax exemption.
Run the front.
So I'm just moving to endorse the public engagement process outlined in attachment 1, which is that attachment with the November dates and December.
And that was
We all
seconded
discussed,
by Council.
sorry. We all discussed, and Diane brought up potentially meeting in advance of.
Yeah, but I think that was separate to this. We endorse that one and then we have a meeting of council.
So do we need to include the meeting in advance of in this, or not? I know that this is for the public
Make a
engagement.
subsequent motion.
So
Or a
just-
friendly amendment.
I'm looking for
Friendly amendment
direction.
to include a date plan for council engagement.
I'm just simply looking for direction on whether we can identify a date or dates that this council would like to meet to discuss this document before we go to the public, because that's what I heard Councilor Brennan say. I thought that, and if that's not what you said, then I'm saying it.
Prior to the 18th.
Yeah, no problems at all, but that's not what I said. It's that's specifically quite different from what I said. If that's of any help, because what I thought was that we had a meeting to talk about our strategic plan, and that it wouldn't include specific budget issues. It would just be a high-level discussion about where we want to go, what our goals are, and then apply that to the budget in a
Strategic
subsequent
direction. Is that what you're saying?
strategic
direction.
plan.
Yeah.
If we can get this council together to have a meeting about anything, I'm there.
But I think that our staff need more specific direction, that what would the agenda be for the meeting pre-November 18th?
We've had agendas come out and it says council strategic direction. We had one, we've gone in camera on that. That to me is good enough. It was good enough before, it's good enough now. Because I arrived on February 23rd to a meeting that said council strategic direction. That's good enough for me. It's good enough in one instance, it's good enough in another.
Councilor Court.
I'm personally,
We have a motion on the floor too.
Well, let's deal with.
sorry, what's the motion?
The
To
number two.
endorse the public engagement process outlined in attachment.
Okay, no, I'm not speaking to that.
Question?
Question, all those in favor? Opposed? None.
Then I would move that council meet pre-November 18th to have a discussion regarding our strategic plan for 2016. Or no, for our term, for this, our strategic plan for the balance of the term.
The actual plan, or what Ted suggested, of strategic initiatives, because there's a difference. He said,
Yeah, I'm not sure how one sets strategic initiatives without a plan.
but he says the strategic plan takes a long time, right? I'm just,
We did that until we had our first plan.
yeah, I'm not exactly sure.
My understanding is the RDN did their strategic plan in, what, a day? Of a meeting?
But there was no public consultation, and the CAO was saying
Would we
that
not
we need.
develop our strategic plan and then take it out for public consultation?
I think that's a good
Aye.
starting
That's
point,
good.
just to get
I-
together.
Let's just, let's just, everybody's
I second.
calling to talk about it, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Councilor Best first.
Oh, I just wanted
Oh,
to
no, I
say.
wasn't.
I second.
okay.
Yeah, you do, you made it.
Councilor Owen?
No, I-
Seconded.
Seconded the motion. Anybody want to speak to this motion? I just have one question with regards to this strategic plan for our term. That would be 3 years
For the balance of it.
for the balance of our term. So that would be for 3 years. It's going to take a while to develop it. And then we end up with a new council in 3 years. So how long does it usually take to develop a strategic plan?
Well, the strategic plan that the last council developed was a massive exercise. And it probably took 4 or 5 months, maybe, that long. I'm not envisioning anything quite as large as that. I think it was the first strategic plan we developed in many years, if not the first. I don't see that this strategic plan would take as long,
But we do want to get the public engaged. in it
and I
as
don't
well,
care
so-
about the term, like make up another number, make
Yeah.
it till the year after.
I mean, we could discuss that once
Yeah.
we get into the strategic plan. Councilor Bessman.
Thank you. We are obligated to have a strategic plan, I understand, and I think that they're 3 years.
There's no obligation.
There's no obligation to have a new strategic plan when this one concludes in December of 2015.
If you mean legislatively, no.
So the last one that we did is in 2012 with facilitators to arrive at this 3-year strategic plan that we have. So then am I understanding that there's no requirement of us to have a strategic plan other than for providing direction to staff for budget deliberations or?
No, it's kind of unique in
Future
Nanaimo.
planning.
Most communities have a strategic plan that's 3 to 5 years and they review it every year.
And we have,
That was the first one I've ever been.
First one we ever did is one on motion on chair, first chief plan we had.
so we haven't,
Haven't
okay.
set the standards to have it.
So then am I hearing you say that then we should be redoing the strategic plan for the next 5 years or 3 years or 4 years?
That would be my recommendation.
And we should
When it
start-
expires, you should be looking to, and this is the year, to redoing it. Fully engage with the community.
So
Should
then
have
the
it done by now, mind you.
So then the
Start
meeting that we are proposing to have to start this high-level process is something that you suggest we do.
I think it's essential for giving direction to the capital planning.
Thank you. So then, Mayor,
Any other questions? Only questions, all in favor? Opposed? Not opposed?
Question. Do I need to make a motion to have a discussion about this year's budget before, or you say we're going to meet anyways before the November the 18th, or?
You already endorsed the plan directly goes to that. It was the 18th.
That's fine.
Mr. Chair, we've got a couple of delegates that have taken time out of their day to come. They've been waiting for about 40 minutes now.
I get that. Took time out of my day.
Can we move the camera, please?
Question
so
period?
Pardon?
Is there any question period? No.
Says
No.
no.
Well, there's a question.
Actually, there is a question period. Any questions? Seeing none. I guess now.
Move a procedural motion to go in camera, but I'd like to ensure that reason land litigation and labor.
Thank you, Mayor. What I understand of the topic, I've identified 91 sub J, which is information prohibited, or information that if were presented in a document would be prohibited from disclosure under Section 21 of FOI. And Section 21 relates to businesses.
Business.
The other one is 2B, which is consideration of information received in highly confidence relating to negotiations between the municipality and the provincial government or the federal government or both, and a third party. These are what I've identified. You can go in camera, discuss those under Section N, and if you feel that it doesn't apply, then that's your call.
So this motion is to go on camera, seconded. Okay. Conversation, call the question, all those in favor? All those opposed? There'll be 3 opposed.
Yeah, vote, but I don't know vote now.
Well, once we get in, then you'll.
That's a backward system,
So
Di.
Councilors Kiff, Gilligan, and myself opposed.